My name's Paula Adams, and I call myself a DeathWalker. And this comes from my grams and my mom. It was just a nickname given to me as a child when I was about 8 years old, when I did feel the calling to be a part of the dying and death world. And over the course of my lifetime, I've come and gone and been separated and then reconnected. And so this is just kind of to tell you what I do and how it has come about over my lifetime. It is equivalent to a death doula, which is currently a very happening thing, and I am so glad that it is happening. I love that death is finally getting their foot in the door. I hope that we'll be able to sit at the table with the big boys pretty soon, but I'll take that, the door is open. Like I said, I started very young. When I was about 8 years old, we lived on a ranch. And, when the dogs had puppies, or the kitten came, or baby lambs or whatever, the birthing and the beauty of the live ones was absolutely spectacular. But I was always drawn towards the runts, to the ones that I knew weren't going to make it and weren't going to be a part of this world. And it was kind of for me to be there. A lot of times, if you'll notice, sometimes the mom will push the baby away, which is perfectly natural in nature. And I just felt drawn to sit with it. Not to hold it or anything, just to sit with it, to be a witness. And so that's how I started, ever since I was 8 years old. My grams and my mom had a lot to do with it. Both of them were holistic. They were spiritual. My grams worked a lot with herbs, and she worked as a medicine woman. And my mom, she was the most exquisite Mother Earth with plants and animals that I have ever witnessed in my entire lifetime. That's just a little background. Some people know this work through Death Doula these days, and that's a beautiful doorway. Mine is just a little bit different. I have always advocated for sovereignty and autonomy and ample end-of-life choices. Growing up in America and then traveling, not extensively, but I have traveled and I have seen how other cultures embrace death. And I have to say that the Western culture is really far behind. It is lacking in so many of the basic foundations that that we should be looking at. And the fear of death, of course, in this country, we do everything in our power to wait till the last minute, postpone it, put it off. And so it really is a double-edged sword. But like I said, I have always advocated for people to when they're dying. The dying person is the most important person in the room. Nothing else matters except for their wishes, their wants, and dying on their terms. And whether it's acceptable for you or the family or whatever is irrelevant. And so that's kind of the doorway that I step through. So a lot of my services are sitting vigil, being the observer, mediating, doing rituals and ceremonies, advocating, and other times just introducing the death conversation, just to make it a little easier for families to get started. My path and the lineage that I stand in is older than any modern life that I have been able to go back to. And granted, I can only go back maybe 2, maybe 3 generations tops, but it is something that I feel that is in my bones. It is something that was a calling to me. And even though I did many other things throughout my lifetime, it always had something to do with caring for, helping out, being there when someone was alone or when no one else would stand up for them. So that's kind of how I fit into this. I also believe too that there are so many people that advocate for life, and we have so many beautiful birthing choices and possibilities and wonders that I'm just not that particular subject is covered very, very well. But when it comes to the dying process and death, there's not a lot of people that can cover that and can do it with the joy that I find. There's no fear for me when I talk about it. It was perfectly natural for me growing up. And I don't remember really a day going by where something or someone didn't run through the house going, oh my God, Silly died, or I killed a hornet's nest, so there was always death. And it was talked to and explained to us. My mom would always talk about the seasons, the planting seasons in our garden. And she would relate that very much to birth and death and how the cycle moves and how we move with it. So there was always that connection. There was always that bigger than us. It's cosmic. It came with us when we came into this place. And it should be remembered and honored. And it should be carried through all the way until a person is no longer in this time and place. When they leave and go out of and return to wherever it is that, their perception is. So that was also something that was taught to me as a child. I didn't choose this work because it sounds poetic or it's some sort of eccentric, odd, plan that I had. I didn't choose it. I've been doing it before it was trendy and a hashtag, and we have deaf doula schools and courses, and again, beautiful doorway, got nothing that just absolutely magnifies and puts a spotlight on death, and I'm for that. I've been for that ever since I was 8 years old, and I'm 62 now. I do it because death, I don't know, it was always there. It just kept tapping me all the time. I had my best friend, I had my daughter, my mom, my grams. There were just so many people throughout. My daughter's best friend. I have had several people who, they're very close to me, but they ended up with no children or they ended up with no spouse. And so they weren't supposed to be alone. I was supposed to be there with them. And so people always find me at the hardest moments of their lives. And that's something else that I would like to change. I would like to be introduced to them before they get to the hardest moments, so that I can help them lay that groundwork, so that maybe it doesn't hammer you as hard. Maybe it doesn't knock you flat on your ass. Maybe you have a little preparation. And of course, I'll always, if you're destined to find me, you will find me. It's just that simple. I don't need to advertise. I don't need to go on Yelp. I mean, all that helps. But I firmly believe that the people who are meant for me will come to me. And I was taught this again through connection. It's a vibrational connection. It's a cosmic connection. It's a humanity connection. It's, it's all these things rolled up into one. And it's just a vibration that goes out. It's an energy that I bring. I realized I was already walking with death long before I had language for it. I mean, an 8-year-old just doesn't, an 8-year-old uses her imagination and, does that kind of thing too. And so it took me a little while for me to really grasp, that it was the death and the dying process. And as I got older, of course, it became more adult-like and less childlike. But I still carry my childlike wonder. I still carry that in awness of death. I think it's brilliant on some level. On some Nancy Drew, I want to solve the cosmic riddle. That's one of mine. You might have had a moment like that, I don't know. A moment when you realize that you've been doing whatever the work you're doing, you do it quietly, you do instinctively all along. And then one day it just kind of hits you. Oh yeah, that's what I do. That's what I've been called to do. How old is my work really? My work, like I said, goes back several generations. But it goes back to long before we had hospitals or hospice or even a word for doula. It's just in service. And it usually fell upon the females. to do it. Every community had people who tended to the dying, and we still do. We just all do it differently. But even since the beginning of the human race, there's always been someone like me, someone who tends to the dying. Even in nature, sometimes you'll see it. These people, they did things like body washers, vigil keepers, midwives who helped with the last breath, not only for the dying person, but also for the ones that were still remaining. There were singers of the final songs, the final hymns, the final chants, whatever the culture, comes with your culture. The ones who sat through the night and the day and the night again and the day again, and the ones who weren't afraid to touch the dead. The work is ancient. It goes back to Sumerian time. It even goes back before that. If you ever want to look at an interesting documentary, there's a couple on the PBS pipeline, and they talk about death. Check out those documentaries. There's the Anka, there's the Egyptians, there's the Sumera. I mean, and really look how they revered and they paid attention to their dying. And that's something that over the years we have completely got away from. Not only is it ancient, but for me it's human. It's part of the human experience for me. And it's also communal. I know we don't think too much about community and all that. I mean, it's kind of, with the isolation and the separatist and the climate right now, oh dear God. But death is always, just like birth is about coming together, death is about coming together too. We just tend to come after the dying part. We do the big celebrating with the funerals and the wakes. But really and truly, it should be started from the dying process out. When you have a birth, yes, a lot of people show up for the birth, but there are a lot of people that walk with that person who's getting ready to be birthed. It's a community thing. And we've lost that. And I'm not sure we really know how to get that back. I don't think it was really part of any legacy that a lot of people have. Every culture has its versions of a DeathWalker. Their names may have been different. There were psychopomps, there's threshold tenders, there's death midwives, there's shroud makers, there's bone keepers, there's last watchers, and then, and I'm sure there's more. Those are just the ones that I grabbed. And then something happened. There was a dormancy, I think. That's what I call it. It just kind of went dormant. Industrialization came in. Hospitals were brought in. Hospice was brought in, and it became more of an institution rather than a communal threshold. And again, I'll say it again, there's a dormancy. As death became medicalized and institutionalized and hidden away, the role went quiet. It, got tucked away somewhere and has just been lost over the decades. It's not gone. It's just dormant, and it needs to be resuscitated. It needs to be brought back to the forefront. So it's just kind of slumbering and sleeping under the surface. And, the whole while, the world forgot how to care for its own dead. We just put it in the hands of someone else. Here you go. You can have them. Here you go. And families handed death over to systems. That's just it in a nutshell. That's what's been going on. Communities lost their rituals, the language softened, and silence grew. That was just the outcome. That was not the consequence, but the other side of the coin that ended up happening when we did bring in the hospitalization and the systems. And I'm not knocking the systems. I'm just saying we forgot to balance. Or we didn't ever plan to balance. I'm not sure which. And so what's happening now is that, the death movement is exploding. And perhaps if we had let it be balanced in the beginning, we wouldn't have this huge explosion, this huge diversity going on, which I love. This is, for me as a death walker, this is prime A, grade A stuff that I want to sink my teeth into. Make no mistake. The roles never disappeared. They just changed. They just kept moving, but they did it silently. And it waited. It waited like everything else in nature for its proper time, everything else in the cosmos. If you look when a supernova blows, if you see when a star dies out, if you'll watch in nature when, the seasons turn, the trees all know when to die and how to die, and what needs to hibernate hibernates. So it just laid waiting. People like me, we just laid waiting. We quietly went about our deal, and, that was okay. The resurfacing of it really started in the late 20th century. Hospice began to reawaken pieces of this work. In the early 2000s, the term death doula did emerge, and it was a modern name for what I consider an ancient role, but I was thrilled to see it happening. And now the work is rising again. People are remembering, communities are reclaiming stuff, and the title DeathWalker is returning to the surface. I like to think of it as mythic, grounded, and unapologetically clear. And that's what I am. I am unapologetically clear. If your dying person reaches out and says they want medical aid in dying, and they have thought this process through, and they have a working plan, and we play that tape through, and it is their desire and their wish, that I'm standing by that person, or I'm advocating for that person. I build teams for that person. And if I'm the only person that can do that, then I'm that person. If someone is graciously ready to go into hospice and they would like a little bit more ritual, a little bit more old school, I'm there. It is what my intention and my motivations are for the dying person. I can't say this enough. They are the most important people in the room. They are the main player in the very last performance that they're going to have as human beings. And we give all kinds of legal things that, can be done. Medical aid in dying is legal in some states. You have VSED, which is voluntarily stoppage of eating and drinking. It's legal everywhere. You have people who are refusing to carry on treatment. You have DNRs, you have all these kinds of things, and they're legal, but a lot of them aren't accessible. So you're narrowing the gap. And instead of allowing people to choose, like as in a community gathered around, without the stigma of other people's opinions, it's nobody's business but the dying person's business. So, I am unapologetically clear on that. For me, it'll be quite the sight to see where it goes from here and what happens in the next decade. My calling, my my passion, shall we say, is, like I said, bringing autonomy and sovereignty and the choice of how you want to end your life, how you want to die on your terms. I think that should be a human right, period. End of story. Nothing else to be said about that. So that's the direction that I go into. My other passion is to bring the community together. We have to have community. Yes, a lot of people have loved ones, and more power to you, but there are many, many, many more people than you think in this country who don't have anyone, who don't have family, who don't have kids, who don't have spouses, who don't have anyone. They are literally in the dying process alone, stuck by the institution, stuck by the medical community, because that's the only thing that is accessible money-wise, insurance-wise. The system is set. And so I think it's time that we bring in other ideas. I think it's time, this is a time for revelation and revolution in coming up with new communities and new concepts to honor death as much as we do birth. And one of those is, there's a possibility of something that I like to call Destiny's Door Death Retreat, which would encompass a full-blown community. 12 acres of land, give or take, a nice garden like my mom used to do. And we would have, it would be an educational program as well. Farm to table death talks and invite the outside community to come in. Let's have a talk about death. Let's talk about green burials. Let's talk about, let's offer some, if someone is completely by themselves and I have a spare room in the house, why not offer hospice for them so they don't have to be alone? Why not offer medical aid in dying? Why not let individuals have a north view, a south view, a west view, an east view, and allow them to have medical aid in dying with their families around them, with the view of nature, however they choose to do it? How about a grief house? How about bringing in shaman and Reiki healers? How about bringing in the new end of death doulas, and let's hear what their ideas are, and let's see what their schooling and what their training looks like. How about offering all kinds of classes? Let's talk about maybe cremation. Let's talk about the burial costs. Let's talk about body washing and death shrouding, how to make your death shroud. There are so many things. And when you start building a community and you have people living there all year round and they can rotate in and out. And what would be really cool is if it turned into a complete intentional community with both birth and death. That to me would be something, that after I'm long gone, that would be the next phase of my plan. And I have my, I have the blueprints, I have everything up. I'm working on the funding. I trust the universe will supply. Right now the hookup is land, and we're looking for that. I'm hoping somewhere in New Mexico if I can get it. If not, I'll look at any of the other states. But medical aid in dying must be an option. Hospice, voluntary stoppage of eating and drinking. It must be a state where I can, not guarantee, but that I can set up fairly well for my clients to be able to have DNRs and all the stuff and honored and respected. So yes, there is a mission, and there is, the articles are written, the people for the board are there, and it has worked out perfectly for me so far, and I believe it will. One of the things that really rooted me and got me back into it was COVID. It broke my heart to know that I lived 6 blocks from a nursing home, and people were not going to be able to be with their loved ones. Most times they died alone because there wasn't even enough staff to be in there. So I was grateful that there was a solution, and I was able to help a little bit. And when I got to tell 5 or 6 families that, it's okay, your family wasn't alone. They did have someone there. That kind of really reinforced that I needed to stand up, start speaking, start writing. And I do write a lot of articles. I have a lot of how-to stuff. So I'll be adding more to the YouTube channel so you can listen. You can watch me and listen to me if you're not into reading. I have a Substack. You're welcome to check out that. I have a Facebook page, your personal page. I don't have a page in Facebook. I'm not diving that deep into meta anymore. And of course, I believe I belong on Instagram, TikTok, and I think LinkedIn, and a lot. I have a social media presence. I absolutely do. And I have 2 YouTube channels. One is about me, the death worker in my life, and behind the scenes and, stuff. And then I do have a Destiny's Door where I do have a classroom where I teach how to build an advocate team, what to look for as far as medical aid in dying in a state, residency. I also do a lot of writing about hospice. I also do a lot of writing pertaining to, I'm a firm believer that we should not have to wait and suffer and be in our bodies until our bodies give out. Our bodies are organic. They're earth. They're earth originated. I am not. I am cosmically originated. And this beautiful bioorganic body that I have been absolutely endowed and blessed with, yes, it allowed the spirit, the essence, the energy, the vibration, pick any word you'd like to do, soul, whatever word it is that, floats your boat, so to speak, and follows your religious or spiritual path, by all means, just, fill in the blank. But for me, this is an accessory. It's an accessory just like what I wear. Now, it's a necessity accessory to be Paula, this, person that I am and speaking to you here. But nonetheless, it is an accessory. And when it gets done, it goes back into the earth. It is recycled back in. The essence, the spirit, the soul, if you will, that doesn't. It transmutes, it transforms, it returns back to where I once came from, and is how I look at it. And for that energy to have to be trapped, to have to sit back and be, for lack of a better word, held hostage, or tempered and made to sit in a corner, don't put baby in the corner, so to speak. And boy, did I just date my age on that. Holy cow. But anyways, that's another thing that I talk heavily about. When people say, hospice is the way to go, hospice is it. It can't be the only way. It shouldn't be the only way to go. Not everyone wants to go through hospice. I don't. Medical aid and dying, babe, all the way. If not, I'll use some of my ancient and ritual and cultural teachings and legacies that I have. But I have and again, I am not knocking hospice. Hospice is beautiful, folks. 70 to 80% of the population will walk right into it, and they will embrace it and hold on to it. My community, the people that I work with, the people that find me, they're not in those numbers. They're not those statistics. They're the other ones. They're the rest of the humans. And they count and they matter so much. 100% of us human beings deserve the right to choose how we would like to die on our terms, period. And so I speak for that 20 to 30% of the population. That's who I'm drawn to. And I work a lot with the hospice. I mean, I live in Florida. So absolutely, hospice is about the only way to go. Visa is very hard to get here. And it takes quite the personality. It takes quite the team to have voluntary stoppage of eating and drinking. And so these are some things that, I'll be going on, more in detail in my classroom and, on my personal page when I just feel like speaking out and being vocal. But, it's always been something for me. I have a cape that, my mother gave me when I was a child. I know that sounds weird, but it's a beautiful cape and it has a hood. And, over the years, I've collected iron-on patches and stuff like that. My kids have added to them for my birthdays. And it's, my DeathWalker cape. And maybe I'll show it to you one of these days. I don't know. Maybe I'll sport it. But it's very important to me. It's also very important to me that, we talk to children. We start this earlier. I've written I have a coloring book out that really is helpful. It shows all the flowers and what they represent as far as death goes, what kind of feelings that they bring out. I'm working on a book currently called Fred is Dead. It's about a carnival goldfish. And, there's just so many things that as a death walker, for me, there's so many ways that you can be of service. And that's what the whole deal is to be of service. I hold death cafes when I can. I hold workshops for children and death shroud workshops once or twice, sometimes 3 times a year, not a lot. I have a really good concept for a couple books, and I'll be putting those together. But I really just wanted to invite you in and let you know what it is as a death walker that I do. I walk with people all the way up to the veil, all the way to their threshold, till they take their last breath. And sometimes I'm there after. I wash the bodies, I do the rituals, the ceremonies that I was taught to do from my ancestors when someone dies. And it's greatly appreciated by a lot of families. And a lot of families are learning. They didn't know how to do it, and so they asked me to be there so I could teach them. And this is for younger generations who are going to grow up to do it as well. And I think that's beautiful. And that's enough for me. I just really wanted to introduce myself and speak a little bit about it. So there you go. That's a little bit about me. So much love. And talk about death. Think about how your last big performance is going to look. What do you want it to look like? You're the main character. You're the writer, the producer, the director. What does that story look like? If you ever need any help, you know where to find me. Peace all.